The Adiwale mansion stood like a crown jewel in the heart of Ikoyi, Lagos. Its walls gleamed with imported marble, its gates guarded by men in black, and its sprawling lawns manicured daily by teams of gardeners. The house was not just a home. It was a symbol of power, arrogance, and the unchallenged wealth of its owner, Chief Richard Adiwale, a billionaire oil magnate whose name stirred fear and admiration across the city. Thank you for joining. Feel free to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification. Subscribe and turn on notifications. To the outside world, Richard was a self-made man, the poster child of ambition. But those who worked for him knew another side, one cold, cruel, and unforgiving. His staff walked on eggshells, fearful of his temper and mocking laughter. Among them was Amora Nadi, a 22-year-old maid. Her dark eyes carried stories of hardship, her small frame moving tirelessly through endless chores. Amora had left her village in Enugu after her father's death, forced to support her sick mother and younger siblings. She endured the humiliation of servitude because it was better than watching her family starve. That night, after polishing marble floors until her knees ached, Amora climbed the stairs to retrieve linens. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. Mistakenly, she pushed open a door, thinking it was a laundry closet, but instead it was a guest room. The plush mattress called to her body like an ocean to a drowning soul. She whispered, "Just 5 minutes," before collapsing onto the bed. Within seconds, she slipped into the deepest sleep she'd known in months. Outside, the mansion's chandeliers glistened. Inside, fate quietly shifted. Richard returned home close to midnight, his Armani suit still crisp, his mood sour after a deal soured in London. He wanted nothing more than to pour himself a drink and retreat to his guest room. But when he pushed the door open, his jaw tightened. There she was, Amora, sprawled across his imported silk sheets, her worn uniform wrinkled, her head sunk into his designer pillows. Instead of anger, amusement danced in his eyes. "A maid," he sneered, "sleeping like a queen in my palace." He pulled out his iPhone, snapping multiple pictures. But Richard wasn't content to keep the moment private. He uploaded the images to his exclusive WhatsApp group filled with fellow billionaires, politicians, and socialites. The caption, "Poverty is bold. My maid thinks she's Madame Adiwale, faced with tears of joy, faced with tears of joy." Within minutes, laughter filled the group chat. Messages poured in. "Richard, you days spoil us with crews." "That's brave Rio, sleeping on a billionaire's bed." "Fire her. Teach her a lesson." The next morning, the photos leaked. By dawn, Twitter was ablaze with hashtags like #Maid on the bed. Instagram reels mocked her with skits, and TikTok comedians recreated the scenario for clout. Amora woke up to whispers, snickers, and the harsh glow of phones pointed at her. Confused, she stumbled out of bed, only to be met by the echo of her own shame across the mansion. Tears welled in her eyes as reality struck. Her dignity had been stolen not by strangers, but by the man she served. By afternoon, the entire city had an opinion. Some laughed. "What nonsense! A maid in a billionaire's bed." Others sympathized. "She's human. She was tired. What did she do wrong?" Memes multiplied. Amora's sleeping face edited onto thrones, onto presidential chairs, even onto Richard's yacht. The internet had turned her pain into a carnival. At the mansion, Richard basked in the attention. He sat at breakfast with his wealthy friends, their laughter echoing as they scrolled through their phones. "I've given Lagos entertainment for the week," he bragged, sipping champagne. Beside him, Vanessa, his new girlfriend, a socialite addicted to clout, sneered, "Richard, you're too soft. If it were me, I'd throw her on the streets. No maid deserves such luxury." Amora, meanwhile, kept to the servants' quarters, her tears soaking her pillow. The other staff avoided her, afraid of being dragged into the scandal. Only one person dared approach her, Chaik, the mansion's driver. "Don't cry, Amora," he whispered as he handed her a handkerchief. "Life no day balanced forever. One day, tables go turn. You hear me?" She nodded faintly, but his words clung to her heart. A week later, Richard hosted a grand dinner for foreign investors. The mansion shimmered with gold, violins played in the background, and waiters in bow ties carried champagne glasses. Amora, force a save, moved quietly among the guests. She kept her head down, but one man's gaze lingered on her. It was Ambassador Chukwudi Naji, a diplomat known for his philanthropy. His eyes softened as he studied her face. Later, when she poured him wine, he leaned close and asked gently, "What is your name?" "Amora, sir," she whispered. He froze. "Amora, Nadi." She nodded, surprised. Ambassador Naji's eyes glistened. "Your father, he was my teacher in Enugu. That man shaped my life. Without him, I would not be here." The world spun for Amora. No one had mentioned her father in years. She bit her lip to stop herself from breaking down in front of strangers. Ambassador Naji touched her arm softly. "Child, you are more than this job. I see pain in your eyes, but remember, no humiliation lasts forever. Strength runs in your blood." Unbeknownst to her, he would soon become a key player in rewriting her destiny. The cracks in Richard's empire appeared swiftly. The government launched an investigation into one of his oil deals. Whispers of bribery and tax evasion filled the air. Investors began to withdraw, and his stock value dipped. At the same time, Amora's story caught the attention of a women's empowerment NGO. One of their directors saw beyond the memes and ridicule. They reached out privately, offering to sponsor her education if she wanted to leave domestic service. For the first time in months, a spark of hope flickered in Amora's chest. But Richard remained unrepentant. At another high society party, he smirked, pointed at her, and announced loudly, "That's my famous maid on my bed. Careful, gentlemen, or she'll take over your house too." The crowd roared with laughter. Amora's cheeks boned, but she held her head high this time, because deep down, she knew something Richard didn't. Every insult he hurled was building his downfall. Karma had begun to sharpen its sword. The buzzing of Amora's small Nokia phone startled her as she folded laundry late one night. She hesitated before answering, thinking it might be another unknown caller mocking her. But instead, a calm woman's voice spoke. "Hello, Amora? This is Mrs. Bello from Women Rising Foundation. We saw your story online. Please, don't be afraid. We want to help you." At first, Amora thought it was a prank. But the woman continued, explaining that the NGO specialized in uplifting young women trapped in cycles of servitude and humiliation. They wanted to sponsor her education and provide a safe place to stay as she chose to leave the mansion. Amora's hands trembled as she listened. Could it really be possible? To leave this place of endless insults, to escape Richard's grip? Taze blurred her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." Meanwhile, Richard was oblivious to the lifeline being extended to her. At that very moment, he was on the phone boasting to a senator about his new deal in Dubai, unaware that cracks were spreading beneath his empire. That night, as Amora lay on her thin mattress, she whispered a prayer. "God, if this is truly the way, open the door wider." The Adiwale Empire began to shake. News broke that Richard's foreign accounts were under scrutiny by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. Rumors of bribes, shady contracts, and land scandals swirled in the media. For the first time, Richard faced questions he couldn't laugh off. His investors in Dubai pulled out. Stocks in his oil company plunged. Even Vanessa, his glamorous girlfriend, grew restless. She wasn't loyal to him. She was loyal to wealth, and wealth was slipping away. One morning, as he sat in his office fuming over the front-page headline, "Billionaire Under Fire," Vanessa entered, her tone sharp. "Richard, people are saying you're finished. Maybe it's time to lay low." Richard snapped, slamming the newspaper on the desk. "Do I look like a man who falls? I built this empire from the ground. No rumor can destroy me." But deep inside, fear gnawed at him. For the first time in decades, he wasn't in control. Downstairs, Amora overheard whispers among the staff. "Olga's enemies are closing in." For once, the mansion wasn't buzzing with pride. It trembled with uncertainty. Amora began to walk differently in the mansion. The humiliation of Richard's mockery still burned, but she no longer shrank from it. Chaik noticed a change. "You day carry yourself like person we don't see tomorrow," he teased. Amora smiled faintly. "Because tomorrow day promised something better, Chaik. I feel it." She had started attending evening literacy classes secretly sponsored by Women Rising Foundation. Though she returned late and exhausted, she felt alive for the first time in years. One evening, as she studied by candlelight, Ambassador Najib visited the mansion again for a small political meeting. Spotting her in the corridor with books in hand, he stopped her. "You are reading?" he asked, impressed. "Yes, sir," she said shyly. "I want to be more than this uniform." His eyes softened. "Good. Your father would be proud. Never let their laughter define you. Let your strength speak louder." Those words became fuel for her spirit. Meanwhile, Richard, unaware of her transformation, continued mocking her at gatherings. He thought she was still the fragile maid he humiliated. He had no idea she was slowly building wings. One humid night, Richard held a meeting with lawyers in his study. Voices rose, doors slammed. Curious, Amora lingered nearby, balancing a tray of wine glasses. Through the slightly open door, she heard something that made her blood run cold. "Chief Adiwale," one lawyer said firmly, "you must settle this inheritance dispute. The late Chief Okoro's daughter has every right to contest ownership of the mansion." Amora froze. "The mansion?" Another lawyer added. "Documents prove Okoro was a rightful co-owner before his death. If his family presses charges, you could lose everything." Richard growled. "Nonsense. That house is mine. Who even remembers Okoro's family?" Amora's hands shook as she carefully backed away. She didn't know much about business, but she understood enough. The mansion Richard mocked her in might not even belong to him fully. That night, she couldn't sleep. Questions spun in her head. Was this God's hand? Was karma peeling back his empire piece by piece? The media storm intensified. Blogs and newspapers now ran daily stories about Richard's legal troubles. Activists began dragging up the Maid in the bed incident, reframing it, not as comedy, but as cruelty. One headline read, "Mocking the poor while stealing from the nation." Twitter exploded again. This time, people weren't laughing. They were angry. They shared Amora's pictures with captions like, "She deserved rest, not ridicule." Others wrote, "The billionaire who mocks servant but steals from Nigeria." For the first time, public opinion turned against Richard. Sponsors withdrew from his charity gala. Politicians distanced themselves. Even his billionaire friends, who once laughed with him, began whispering behind his back. Inside the mansion, Amora felt a shift. Staff who once mocked her now treated her with quiet respect. Chike grinned at her one evening and said, "You see? God Donde balanced the table small. And though she remained cautious, Amora felt something new blooming inside her. Hope, dignity, and the quiet assurance that her story was far from over. Richard had always believed betrayal only came from outsiders, but his downfall began within. One evening, Vanessa, his glamorous girlfriend, slipped out of the mansion in a glittering gown, pretending she was headed for a charity event. Instead, she was meeting Richard's fiercest business rival, Chief Martins Okafor. Martins was younger, equally wealthy, and hungry to see Richard fall. Vanessa leaned across the table in a private lounge, her voice dripping with venom. "Richard's empire is collapsing. His accounts are under probe, and that mansion you envy, it might not even be his legally." Martins grinned, his gold watch glinting. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because when he crashes, I don't plan to sink with him. I want a seat beside power, not beneath ruins." By the time Vanessa returned to the mansion, Richard was in the living room boasting on a phone call, unaware that the woman smiling at him had just sold him out. Upstairs, Amora overheard fragments of his conversations with lawyers. Each word deepened her suspicion. Richard's empire wasn't just crumbling. It was about to collapse entirely. Amora's evenings with Women Rising Foundation began to bear fruit. She could now read contracts, understand letters, and write essays. She felt her mind opening like a door she didn't know existed. One night, she stayed late after class. Mrs. Below, the NGO leader, handed her a form. "Amora, there's a scholarship to study human resources and management in the university. With your story, you qualify, but you must decide if you want to take this leap." Amora clutched the paper, her hands trembling. The idea of stepping into a classroom as a student, not as a servant, felt like a dream too big. Chike encouraged her the next morning. If N.A. dream, Abig no wake. You don suffer. This is your time. Amora signed the form. That small act shifted something inside her. She was no longer just a maid mocked in memes. She was a woman preparing to rewrite her story. Meanwhile, Richard noticed her quiet confidence. One day, as she carried a tray past him, he snapped, "Why are you walking like you own this place?" She paused, locked eyes with him, and for the first time didn't cower. "Because, sir, no one can steal the way I carry myself." Richard's jaw clenched. He didn't know it yet, but that small act of defiance marked the beginning of the end. The secret about the mansion came to light faster than Richard expected. A young woman in her late 20s stormed into the Adiwale mansion one humid afternoon, flanked by lawyers. She introduced herself as Kaioma Okoro, daughter of the late Chief Okoro, the co-owner Richard had dismissed. "This house belongs to my family," she declared, dropping legal documents on Richard's glass table. "You've squatted here long enough." The staff froze. For the first time, someone was speaking to Richard without fear. Richard's face turned red. "How dare you walk into my home with such nonsense?" "Guards!" But the guards hesitated. Whispers of Richard's crumbling power had spread. No one wanted to cross Kaioma, whose lawyers carried stamped court papers. Amora, watching from the corridor, felt her heart race. She didn't know Kaioma personally, but something deep inside told her, this is the storm that will sweep him away. By nightfall, social media buzz again. Okoro family reclaims mansion from disgraced billionaire. The mansion became a war zone. Richard ranted, threw glasses against walls, and shouted at staff. But his fury couldn't stop what came next. Vanessa's betrayal was exposed when journalists published leaked photos of her attending a gala on Martin's Okafor's arm. The same tabloids that once praised Richard's power couple status now mocked him with headlines, from billionaire's queen to rival's mistress. Vanessa dumps Richard amid collapse. Richard nearly collapsed when he saw the papers. His pride had been wounded deeper than his finances. He raged. "How dare she betray me? After all I gave her." The staff whispered among themselves. Some smirked quietly. Karma was serving him faster than anyone expected. Amora, though still cautious, felt a strange satisfaction. She remembered the night Richard had mocked her at the party. Now, the same man was the city's laughingstock. She whispered under her breath, "Tables do turn." The shift in power inside the mansion became undeniable. One morning, journalists camped outside the gates, shouting questions about the ownership scandal. Inside, Richard fumed as calls from partners went unanswered. Meanwhile, Amora walked confidently past the reporters, heading to her evening classes. One journalist even stopped her. "Are you the maid from the viral photo?" Amora hesitated, then lifted her chin. "Yes, but I am not just a maid. I am a student now, and one day I'll be more." The clip went viral. But unlike before, people didn't laugh. They applauded. Hashtags like #AmoraRises trended. She became a quiet symbol of resilience. Mrs. Bello from the NGO called her, "Amora, do you realize you're inspiring thousands? Don't stop. Keep walking tall." Inside the mansion, Richard saw the viral clip. His blood boiled. The girl he once mocked had become the city's darling, while he was now the punchline. For the first time, he whispered to himself in fear, "What if I'm the one who ends up begging her?" The Lagos High Court buzzed with reporters, lawyers, and curious onlookers. Richard Adiwale, once untouchable, now stood in the dock like any ordinary man. Across from him sat Kaioma Okoro, her lawyer's armed with decades-old documents proving her father's stake in the mansion. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Chief Adiwale, records show you have occupied this property illegally since the passing of Chief Okoro. Do you deny this?" Richard wiped sweat from his brow. "My lord, I invested millions into that house. It's mine by right." Kaioma's lawyer rose sharply. "Investments don't erase ownership." He mocked servants while squatting on stolen property. Gasps filled the courtroom. Cameras clicked furiously. In the gallery, Amora sat quietly, her hands clasped. She wasn't directly involved in the case, but something about watching Richard shrink before the law filled her with vindication. This was the same man who had paraded her shame for laughs. Now, it was his turn to be exposed publicly. By the end of the hearing, the judge adjourned, but the verdict was clear. Richard was losing grip fast. Back at the mansion, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Gone were the lavish dinners, the endless parties, and the arrogant laughter. The once busy halls echoed with silence. Vanessa had vanished, moving in with Martin's Okafor. Most of the staff had quietly resigned, sensing the end. Only Amora and Chike remained, partly because they had nowhere else to go yet, partly to see the full unfold. Richard wandered the marble corridors at night, muttering to himself. The same bed where Amora once slept had become his prison of insomnia. One night, he saw Amora carrying her books and snapped. "Do you enjoy this? Watching me collapse." Amora met his gaze calmly. "Sir, I don't enjoy anyone suffering. But I remember what you said, that I was nothing, and now I know better. I am more than you ever saw." Her words pierced him deeper than any headline. By dawn, he received the official notice. If he didn't vacate the mansion within 14 days, the Okoro family would seize it. For the first time in decades, Richard Adiwale had nowhere to call home. While Richard crumbled, Amora soared. The scholarship she had applied for came through, full tuition covered, with living allowance. At a small farewell gathering hosted by Women Rising Foundation, Amora stood before young women from different backgrounds and told her story. "They mocked me for being tired. They laughed because I fell asleep on a bed. But sometimes, when life forces you to the floor, it's only so you can rise taller. Never let anyone tell you your place. Decide it yourself." The room erupted in applause. Clips of her speech hit YouTube and Twitter, amassing thousands of views within hours. Hashimura Rises trended again, this time globally. Ambassador Naji, who had always watched her quietly, smiled proudly. "Your father's spirit lives in you, Amora. The world will know your name." Meanwhile, in the shadows of the internet, memes mocked Richard. His fall was now the city's favorite entertainment. 2 weeks later, the mansion gates opened not for limousines but for movers. The Okoro family reclaimed the estate legally, escorted by court officers. Richard stood by, helpless, as his belongings were packed into trucks. Journalists swarmed the gates, snapping pictures of the once mighty billionaire reduced to nothing. "Chief Richard, where will you go now?" one shouted. He pushed past them angrily, but his silence spoke louder than words. In a twist of fate, Richard found himself moving into a modest hotel suite, stripped of his servants, his glamour, his power. The man who once mocked a maid for sleeping in his bed was now mocked for losing his own. One evening, broke and bitter, he encountered Amora again, this time at a community event where she was speaking. Their eyes met. The crowd cheered her name while ignoring him completely. For the first time, he bowed his head in shame. Months passed. Amora enrolled in university, thriving in her studies, her story continuing to inspire thousands. She no longer wore Maid's uniform. She wore dignity, confidence, and hope. At a public empowerment conference, she stood on stage as a keynote speaker. The whole roared with applause as she ended her speech. "Once, I was mocked for resting. Today, I rise because I never gave up." To anyone listening, your circumstances don't define you. Your resilience does. In the crowd, unnoticed, sat Richard Adiwale. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He listened, his chest heavy with regret. The same Maid he once laughed at was now the voice the world admired. When the applause thundered, he whispered to himself, "Truly, karma has flipped the script." Amora, walking off stage, never looked back. Her story was no longer tied to his cruelty. It was tied to her destiny. The billionaire had mocked the maid for sleeping in his bed. But in the end, she woke up to own something greater, her life, her power, and the respect of the world.